You ask any boatie what their favorite boat is, and I can guarantee this discussion will come up. Is it aluminium or is it fiberglass? And that is exactly what we're gonna chat about today. I've been lucky enough to both own and operate both of these boats. This was the one I grew up on. My dad had it and I've done a lot of fishing out of that. And this was the one that I eventually bought. They're both just shy of 5 meters and both 90 horsepower motors on the back. So today I'm going to chat about the key differences that I've learned owning both a fiberglass and an aluminium boat. Now, one of the big differences that I've learned owning both a fiberglass and an aluminium boat is kind of just what you can get away with. And what I mean by that is just the general everyday wear and tear that this can put up with. And by that, I mean pulling it up onto a gravel bed, maybe coming into the boat ramp just that little bit hard, pulling up against the pontoon, probably a bit harder than you should have. You just get a lot more leeway in an aluminium boat, and that's because of how tough they are for how light they are. You're pretty much only gonna get a ding, it's not really a big deal, and you're certainly not gonna crack that, which is 4 mil, or you can even go up to 6 or 8 mil if you go for a plate boat. That's why we see a lot of these boats up in those remote locations like Darwin in the Northern Territory, where the environment is incredibly harsh. Fiberglass, on the other hand, is not as forgiving. It's essentially made out of glass fibers, laid into a mold and then bonded with resin. Now that creates for an incredibly strong internal structure, great for those sustained trips offshore, the marine environment that we're so used to out there, the waves, the winds, the chop, incredibly strong there, but not so in here in these shallower environments. Maybe pulling up on the gravel bed, I wouldn't do so. That's because instead of dinging it, like with this boat here, you're probably going to get a chip in the gel coat, which can lead to all sorts of problems, creating longer cracks and then eventually getting water into the stringers and then it might rot. We certainly never want that to happen. That's not to say this isn't a strong boat. They're both great in different scenarios. It's just up to where you think you're gonna use your boat and what scenario you might find yourself in. Now, when it comes to the ride and comfort of these boats, generally speaking, fiberglass boats have been known for a much smoother, more comfortable ride. That's because they're a much heavier boat, just due to the construction. They sit down in the water and it deals with the wind and the chop much better. It kind of plows through those conditions. An aluminium boat is much lighter for its size, and generally you get a much more responsive drive experience where it reacts to the conditions, and some people don't like that. In saying that, I've owned both of these boats, and I reckon the tech and development in the last 5 years on my Crossfire and the hull design has really closed that gap. And I don't see much of a difference between this boat and my boat now when it comes to ride and comfort. Now, a few of the other key differences I've found between these boats is firstly the noise. I do find that a fiberglass boat is much less noisy underfoot and when you're moving in and around it than the aluminium boat. Just things like getting the anchor out in the aluminium boat, incredibly noisy, the wave laps, putting rods and things away, you just get a lot of feedback. Whereas this, it's nice and quiet underfoot and it's a bit more of a comfortable experience. So that's something to consider if that's the style of boating that you want to do. The second one is the fixings. So this boat, it was so much harder to find the fixings that I needed to put things like electric motors on or different sounder brackets. Whereas that, I could either weld something straight on, drill straight into the aluminium, and it was just a much easier process for that as opposed to this. So if you're looking to add things to your boat, I'd probably recommend that. But if you're looking for that leisurely experience straight out of the box, I guess you could say, then this is probably it. Brand new fiberglass boats look fantastic, but you soon start to get a lot of stain, a lot of scratching, and this boat definitely looks like its age. It's about 15 years plus. That, however, has been up to Queensland and back multiple times over 19 hours on the road, and you wouldn't know. It's just put up with that general wear and tear much better. So there's a few things that come to mind just in that every day-to-day use that I've noticed. Now, when it comes to ease of repair and just general peace of mind, I think aluminium boats definitely get the tick from me. What I mean by that is they don't have any wooden stringers in it, so they can't rot. They're just through and through. What you see is what you get, aluminium the whole way through, albeit for some ply decking or composite decking for the casting deck, but that's easy to replace. With this boat here, the fiberglass boat, for however long I owned it, I think it was about 12 years, I was constantly thinking about what's going on underneath this flooring because I've never actually seen it. I know it's got wooden stringers in it and I'm pretty sure there's a little bit of moisture in there and I just don't know the state of that wood. And that's just something you're gonna have to deal with if you do go for a fiberglass boat. Now, in terms of things like electrolysis, obviously you're never gonna get that on a fiberglass boat. You do get that on the alloy boat, but I do feel as though it's something we can avoid if we know why it's caused and how to prevent it. I think it's a small one in my books. Generally speaking though, I feel as though peace of mind wise, I would much rather be in the aluminium boat, and that's why we see a lot of those used in the top end and in those remote locations, because there's less to go wrong. If you do get a little crack in it, you can spot weld it and it's easy to fix. Well, the final thing to consider is the off-water benefits. And by off-water benefits, I'm talking about towing and maneuverability. When it comes to towing, there's no doubt that this has been a much easier vessel to get around up and down the highway. Just due to the weight, it's much lighter. I use less fuel when I'm driving on trips, and I also feel so much safer knowing I've got a lighter load behind me. The second one is maneuverability. I can personally push this boat in and out of my garage with ease, whereas before I needed a mate or my dad to come give me a hand. So that's also a big consideration. The final one is what vehicle you need to actually tow your boat. In the 5 meter range, it's not so much of a consideration, but as we start to step up from 6, 7, and 8 meters, you're going to start to need a certain vehicle to tow it. Now, you might get away with just using a standard 4x4 cab or an SUV like I've got for an aluminium boat, but for a 7+ meter fiberglass boat, chances are you're going to need a V6 diesel engine or something with a lot of torque, which costs more money. So there's a few things to consider there. And you've got to remember the age-old saying, boat stands for bring out another 1,000. So you've got to ask yourself, what budget do you have to play with before you go purchase your next vessel? Well, there you have it, aluminium and fiberglass. Now, obviously, neither material is better than the other. They've both been around for a long, long time for good reason. But it all depends on what scenario you want to use it for. This is my dad here. This is his boat, the fiberglass boat, and he absolutely loves it. It gives him a really smooth and stable ride in and around his local estuary. He's heading home. See you, mate. And this is my boat, the aluminium boat, which I love now for the style of fishing and boating that I do, which is taking it to some remote locations and targeting big fish like barramundi and Murray cod if I can. But that's a question for you, so let us know in the comments what boat you prefer and why. Until then, I'm gonna go for a bit of a fish this afternoon and put this boat through its paces.